Alright, so today we'll be removing the wheel off of this S1000RR BMW. I've got the rider's manual over here, and on page 197 it contains the instructions of how to remove this front wheel. I'll show you what tools you need. You need to remove this wheel as we go along. So firstly, it says place the motorcycle on an auxiliary stand, which is over there. So I've had to put in some paddock screws. You see them over here. So basically these are some spools on both sides that the stand can grip onto. So then you would push the stand in from underneath. You'll make sure the stand sits so that it hooks into the spool, just like that, and then you just keep pushing the stand until it raises the rear wheel off of the ground. So you can see my rear wheel is spinning. Alright, the next step, disengage the cable from the wheel speed sensor from its holding clips. So let's do that. Alright, so now we are on the right hand side of the bike. If you're looking at it from the front, we've got two clips. Right, so here's your first clip. Just lift up this tab because the cable clips in there from below. Probably need both hands for this. So I'll go ahead and raise this up and unclip the cable. There we go. So I've got this piece free, and then there's another clip over here. You can't really see it all that well, but I'll do my best. And it's a similar style. You just pop it out. There's a little tab that you need to leverage upwards, and then the cable should clip out. Come on. There we go. So don't force it, be gentle, support the cable. It's quite securely mounted in there. Right, so now the next step is down here. Wheel speed sensor. So remove the screw. Just above the sensor there's a little torque screw, and you remove the sensor. Got this torque set here, and I believe it's this one. So this will be, it's a T30 bit. So just keep in mind that before you loosen any screws, you may want to make sure that you have a torque wrench, so that when you reinstall the wheel you can torque the screws to spec. I'm going to go through the torque values with you when I do the installation again. This is just a removal video, and technically for the removal video you don't need a torque wrench. So let's just go ahead and remove this little guy over here. It doesn't tell you how, but I'm just going to gently wiggle it, not pulling on the cable. I'll keep this screw in a safe location. I'll maybe put it in a little Ziploc bag and label it. But if you just wiggle it a bit, the speed sensor comes out, and I'll just leave it slightly sitting slightly into its little hole there. Right, so the next step is to use your number 13 socket to remove the brake caliper bolts, which is this one over here and this one over there. Okay, so on the other side, the bottom bolt is normal, just like this side. And then you have this little bracket for the wheel speed sensor wire attached to the top bolt of the brake caliper. So I'll just fiddle this down onto there and I'll just store these together. It doesn't really matter, but as long as the bracket is on the top bolt. So now force the brake pads slightly apart by rotational movement of the brake caliper against the brake disc. So that's going to be like pushing it in and pulling it back. Just to create a gap, pull it away from the dowels and then use the disc. Just flex it against the disc to make enough clearance so you can slide it out to clear the rim. Something like that. And there we have it. I don't like to hang calipers by their lines, but I've got this towel here. And the plan is to put them here on top. So let me do the same on the other side. Right, so now I have both calipers on top of this wheel cover, but I am concerned about the flex that was needed to bring that other one around this side. But I just tried to manage that carefully. Alright, so now it's telling me to install the front wheel stand. I don't want to do that yet. I'll show you why. I want to loosen the clamping bolts over here. That's our T35. So after installing the stand, you would have had to do this, but I just want to break them loose because it's not as stable on the stand. So then it says support the wheel and remove the quick release axle, which is this. So in order to do that, you'll need a 24mm male hex socket, which is like an Allen key. But I've got this axle removal tool because I was unable to find a 24mm. If you want to use this 24 over here, then you're going to just attach your ratchet onto there. And then the 24 can sit into the axle like that. So I'll just break this loose. I'll support the wheel here with my one hand. There we go. So now that I've got that loose, now I can raise the front. So the stand has these prongs that sit over here under the front forks. You just hold them in an appropriate length, this little distance here, so that the prongs don't protrude too close to the brake disc. And then I'm just going to push down on the stand. I'm not quite sure if the axle is ready to come out just yet, So we'll see. We need to loosen these guys some more. Okay, so I'm sure it's not necessary to remove them all the way, but then putting my axle tool back on, and hopefully this will fit past the stand. Right, so now I've got my one hand under the wheel over here so that I can pull out the axle while supporting the wheel. And there is our axle. And now you should be able to just roll the wheel out. But now my stand is in the way. Yep. So just for reference, it does say on the tire, front use only, and the direction of travel is that way. Right, so just remember to keep all your parts safe. Got a bag here, I'm going to put the axle in, there's some grease on there, maybe you want to retain some of that. I want to install it back the exact same way in line with the manual's instructions. I've taken some photos of the manual because having that little book around with your dirty hands, I should probably be wearing gloves, be more professional, but we'll work towards that. Anyway, so I've got the axle in a little bag. So when I talk about left and right, I'm talking about it from this perspective, so this being the left side and that being the right side. So it's important to not release the pinch bolts that we released on this side. Don't release them on the other side. So that's one of the mistakes that I saw on the previous video, and that is not advised by the manual, and there's a reason for that, which I won't get into now. So I'm just popping these left caliper bolts into a little bag, keep them clean, and keep them together so that I know which parts go where. So there you have it. And then I'll put this in the bag with the axle. There's the left caliper bolts. I wanted to label these to look all professional and stuff, but couldn't find my label maker because I want to print out little labels. I don't want to write on them. But I should have just taken my Sharpie. There's no, like, it's a bit of a waste to print labels for this handful of stuff. So, but then this is the wheel speed sensor bolt. And I would have actually preferred to remove the wheel speed sensor because it's kind of in the way when you're working with the caliper. I would have just liked to be able to separate it from the caliper bracket because there's another clip holding it onto the caliper bracket. But I managed to snake the caliper and its line out behind the wheel speed sensor wire. And that is where my concern for stresses on the brake line was apparent, because to negotiate it around that wheel speed sensor wire was a little bit less than ideal, because I had to make a 180-degree turn on the brake line, but I was just working carefully and I think it should be fine. So then the wheel speed sensor bolt, you may be able to see that there is some thread locker on there. When you reinstall the wheel, they refer to that, and it's called micro encapsulated thread locking compound. So my understanding is that this compound comes with the bolt when you buy the bolt. So I plan to buy another bolt. I've been told the alternative is to use medium strength thread locker, and then you would have to clean out this old compound off of the bolt. But I'm not going to bother with that. I'll go and purchase a new bolt because I plan to remove the brake discs and the wheel speed sensor ring from that wheel, and therefore those are, my understanding is that those are one-time use bolts. So then I'm going to need to buy those bolts anyway, so I may as well pick up a wheel speed sensor bolt at the same time for reinstallation. And then I already have a torque wrench, so if you don't have a torque wrench, maybe you want to pick one of those up if you want to have the peace of mind that you are tightening the screws to the correct spec and you don't over tighten or under tighten them for your safety, since this vehicle is capable of high speed and acceleration, as you may be aware. Right, so one more thing that the manual warns you against: do not use the brake lever while the wheel is not installed, because the brake calipers can lock up and that's going to cause complications, to say the least. So just be careful of that. Maybe, like in my case, I have these handle lever guards, so I could technically use a cable tie and secure this lever guard to my lever to prevent someone or myself from actually engaging the brakes. So that probably won't work very well, but you can find a similar solution to prevent the brakes from being engaged while the wheel is not installed. Right, so I'm a little bit paranoid of leaving my calipers on top of this wheel arch cover. So what I'll do is, I just realized I can still bolt them back onto the brackets in the meantime, because my wheel is going to be off the bike for a number of days. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So you may not even need to bolt them on there because there's some dowels holding it in place, but I'll just thread in the bolts by hand. And I won't even thread them in all the way. That is enough. They're about halfway threaded in. Cool. So we're all done there. Now the calipers, I don't need to have this towel over there, and that's a good idea if the wheel is going to be off for a number of days while you get whatever done to it. If you're doing new tires, if you're replacing discs, whatever the case may be, that gives you some time to get everything you need, reassemble the wheel properly, and then once the wheel comes back, or once my wheel is ready for installation, then I'll do another video to show you how to install it and what the correct torque specs are according to the user manual. This is my 2021 model, and so the torque specs may change, but more on that in the install video. So this is a great position to check out your brake pads, and I can see that mine may be looking fairly low. So I may just pick up a set of brake pads in the meantime and then install the wheel with, just replace the brake pads before I secure the caliper. Right, so this is the problem I've been having. When I removed the wheel, it got a little bit stuck on this thing, which is part of the stand, which is protruding. It's protruding. So this side is done well, where it doesn't protrude. Except when it does protrude, it gives me more peace of mind. So maybe I could have just had it protruding less. So you actually have to hold these back to put them into place, because the springs will push them into their default position, which is very narrow. So you can see these have to extend quite a bit to be able to sit there properly. So I'm not going to fiddle with this.
Excellent. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you found this helpful. Cheers.